Welcome back, everyone. Glad to have you with me here today. Thanks so much for joining on our weekend Cabral HouseCalls. My opportunity to take a look at what the community has asked in terms of questions, and I love being able to go through your questions each and every weekend. I try to get to 6 questions each day on Saturday and Sunday. Hopefully you're tuning in when the show goes live, again, every single weekend. So thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to dive right into the questions here today. They keep on coming, so we have to keep on answering them. And I would say, let's see, we are on 125. So yes, this show is debuting March 19th, and that question came in on January 25th to start. So we are about 7 weeks behind. That means there's been more questions coming in the past few months, and that's okay. We're going to get to all the questions in the order that they come in. And again, I'm happy to be able to do that. So let's dive in. First question from Lorena. Lorena says, hello, you are truly incredible. I love your work. My question is regarding my adrenals. Well, first of all, thank you, Lorena. I appreciate that. And I have an amazing team that helps me make all of this happen, meaning the podcast, the videos every single day, and everything that I do. So again, very, very appreciative for my team making all this happen. So I get to read questions and answer them. So she says, I'm 25-year-old Vada and currently on stage 5 of adrenal fatigue, ongoing resistance. My TSH is functionally low, and so are all my sex hormones. I'm working my way through the de-stress protocol, but I get confused whenever I hear you say the body is under stress, and so it will produce more cortisol. Looking at thyroid, for example, I know my thyroid is reduced in higher levels of cortisol, but in someone that is not producing enough cortisol because the adrenals are exhausted, this doesn't apply, right? I guess my question is, can someone be on fight or flight if they are in the later stages of adrenal fatigue? I would assume that since little cortisol is being produced, the body is not stressed and therefore not in fight or flight. That's a good question. Very, very good question. But it is not the case. So the body can be in fight or flight and still be producing low levels of cortisol. And that is exactly what I had when I had Addison's disease. Now, I'm not saying you have Addison's disease. That's very rare to have Addison's disease, but it's called an HPA axis dysfunction. So hopefully, Lorena, you're going through IHP right now. We teach this in IHP mainly in level 2. But what happens is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis can stop having the body produce so much cortisol. But before it's done that, it always typically produces more for weeks, months, or years, and then eventually you get to that crash, right? And just for regular terms, we might call it adrenal-based fatigue, right? And during that time, the thyroid can begin to lower because the body's lowering metabolic rate. Now, how can you still be in fight or flight? Well, cortisol is not necessarily what gets the body into fight or flight. Cortisol is more like it's second in the parade, and it's really used to give your body energy while in fight or flight, because cortisol is a glucocorticoid. And that means it's essentially a steroid that helps to produce more of an anti-inflammatory action. So that's good in the short term, especially with the immune system in the short term, not the long term. But it helps to break down liver, or signal to break down liver glycogen to make more glucose available in the bloodstream. What really helps get the party started is norepinephrine and adrenaline that get the body revved up. So yes, the body can still be in fight or flight. So your job is to heal the HPA axis and find out what the underlying root causes are. And again, I write about that in the rain barrel effect. So there are many. So please read the first half of that, and you'll see that it can be toxicity. It could be stress, childhood-based trauma. It could be relationship issues. It could be poor nutrition, over-exercise, anything over-taxing on the body. All right? So thank you, Lorena. Stephanie's up next. Hi, before my question, I wanted to thank you and your team for all that you do every day. Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate that. And I'll pass it on to my team. Now to my question. I'm 34 years old, had my gallbladder removed a few years ago, and from time to time I feel similar pain, but to a lower level on my right side, under my ribcage. I was told that sometimes I can have stone residue on that duct between my liver and now my removed gallbladder. I have gotten sonogram, MRI, nothing comes up. My CBC showed for some time to have a high cholesterol, but I managed to bring that down. Currently, I do macros with 50 grams of fat a day and definitely seen a change in my overall health, but I still have this pain. I do strength training 4 times a week and cardio twice a week, 8,000 steps a day. I also drink a gallon of water a day. I take omega-3s, vitamin D, zinc, magnesium, and multivitamins. How much fat should I be consuming and what kinds of fat? I normally eat organic chicken breast, etc. A little bit of coffee, rarely eat processed foods. Okay. So again, if you want to follow along with all the questions, head on over to stephencabral.com/2234. I just shorten them a bit if it's a long question, because I do want to make sure that I get through all 6 questions. So I totally understand where you're coming from, Stephanie. So most people, just because they have their gallbladder removed, they didn't stop the underlying root cause that led to their gallbladder having to be removed in the first place. That's the crazy thing about conventional medicine, that there's an underlying root cause. And so there may still just be, again, you have thousands of ducts in the liver that can have bile in them, or at least hundreds. And the bile may be a little bit more solidified. And when you need to produce more bile, you can get maybe a little bit of pain from the congestion or inflammation there. So first and foremost, I have to just let everybody know, I can't provide any medical advice, medical treatment plans, medical diagnosis, or medical cures. That is not what I produce and provide on the podcast. But a lot of people need to soften the bile in the liver. I don't know if that's you, but sometimes people do things like what's called the Amazing Gallbladder and Liver Cleanse. That's a free podcast at stephencabral.com/podcast. You'll be able to find that. It's an old Ayurvedic liver cleanse, not a detox. Always a difference between a cleanse and a detox. But let me see if I can find that for you. Stephen Cabral. And again, if you ever can't find a podcast, you can always go to cabralsupportgroup.com and just ask which one it is. Michelle or one of the amazing coaches will be able to share that with you. So let's just go to gallbladder cleanse. And I know that you do not have a gallbladder. It's just the name of it. Let's see. A gallbladder always gets me. It has 2 L's, right? Oh, is that it? 206? Let's just see. There we go. Episode 206. So you can go to stephencabral.com/206. And there should be, there it is, Liver and Gallbladder Protocol. It's one of the links. And it should take you to a 1-page PDF, because I read the whole 300-page book for you, and I made a 1-page, there it is. Look at that right there. Okay. So that's for everybody. It's free to use. Again, it's not a treatment plan. But then you want to look at things that soften bile. So malate or malic acid, apples in general, beets, these types of things are going to get that softened over time. It might be a good place to look. And for now, probably don't want to be in a higher fat diet, which I think you've already surmised. All right. And then the probably the easiest fats would be the monounsaturated fats, olive oil, avocado. All right. Yasmin's up next. Would you do a podcast on psoriasis, please? How can we cure it without having to omit absolutely everything from our diet, which is what I see people do? Is it curable? Have you treated patients with skin problems like this? Okay. So 2 things. 1, I don't treat anything. I don't diagnose anything. What I do is I help people with everything. So literally, and I don't say that from an ego standpoint, meaning that it does not matter to me your clinical diagnosis, because psoriasis has an underlying root cause just like everything else, which is why I don't have to say I treat a disease, because I look at the underlying root cause. The majority of psoriasis issues arise from 2 things. 2 things. 1, gut imbalances. 2, stress. Gut imbalances often occur first. Stress is the trigger. Or stress causes gut imbalances, and then stress is still part of the trigger for psoriasis, which is why psoriasis can be fine when you're away on vacation eating all the normal foods that you typically would like to be eating, and there's no psoriasis. But then you come back home and stress follows you, right? And so then it's an issue again. So we help people clean up their gut. I've done many podcasts on psoriasis. So let me just, again, I'm not going to go through it today. Just go to stephencabral.com/podcast, type in psoriasis. You will see at least a dozen podcasts on psoriasis taking you through it. My highest recommendation is to run the Big 5 plus the stool test. If you're only able to run 1 lab, run the stool test if you have psoriasis. If you can run 2, run the Candida metabolic and vitamins test. All right. Those are the 2 labs I would run. And if you can do them all, do the Big 5 plus the stool. You want to figure out what's going on with the gut. And again, then if you can run the stress hormone, moods, and metabolism, great. But there could be heavy metals. There could be a lot of things going on. So I'm not saying that's not the case. But stress and gut, we want to look at first. Heavy metals is a little bit down the line, but certainly can be causal. There's no doubt about it. All right. So hopefully that was helpful. And thank you, Yasmin, for writing in. Anonymous is up next. And by the way, we've worked with over 250,000 client appointments. We've pretty much seen it all by now. And again, I don't say that from an ego standpoint. We're very grateful, my entire team and I, for what we get to do. But we've seen it all by now. All right, Anonymous is up next. Hi, Dr. Cabral. I'm a wine sales rep, and so I have to drink for my job. I love wine, but I get hungover off of one glass. Are there ways to support the body during drinking? I only drink a few glasses a week, max, but I want to make sure I'm staying healthy. Also, any tips for preventing the hangover? Thanks. Okay. Well, the hangover is a sign that your body is not happy with you, right? That's a big sign. Dehydration, depletion of B vitamins, depletion of antioxidants, free radical damage, inflammation, et cetera, et cetera. So most people that get hungover off of one glass of wine, alcohol is very toxic to their body because there's most likely methylation issues, sometimes COMT issues, sometimes DAO issues in terms of their genetics. I certainly have those. There's no doubt about it. But anyway, what do? Well, you support those to the best of your ability. So first, you want to make sure that you don't have bacterial overgrowth in your gut or candida. So you really want to run the same labs I was just talking about. You want to run the candida metabolic and vitamins test and or the bacterium parasite stool test. No doubt about it. Because you want to see, hey, is that fermenting in your gut? Because if candida and bacteria are fermenting it, you're going to feel terrible. I mean, you really are. You're going to feel terrible after one glass of alcohol. So then you want to also support your body and your methylation pathways on a daily basis. The nice thing is it's pretty easy to do. You can take the daily nutritional support, 2 scoops every morning, and you might do 1 to 2 capsules of the activated B complex, which are all methylated B vitamins, methylfolate, methylcobalamin, paradoxal 5-phosphate. So all of those are going to be very, very helpful. And there's much more. I mean, I would do a functional medicine detox. There's a lot of things I would give you, but start there, right? Start there. That's what I would do. That's going to be a good amount. And then of course I would do the immunity protocol along with it. That's your vitamin C to help with oxidation, your vitamin D to help with overall metabolism for the body, and your zinc, which gets depleted with alcohol as well. So yeah, that's what I would do. All right. Daily Foundation Protocol Level 2, Immunity Protocol, run those 2 labs, functional medicine detox every 12 weeks. All right, we're going to keep it at that. Hopefully that's helpful. Allison is up next. Regarding hypothyroidism, which is low thyroid, and Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune thyroid issue, is it possible to reverse these 2? I see a doctor at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, and he tells me it's not even a possibility. Well, unfortunately, Allison, you've been misled. Many people, meaning like millions of people, have reversed their low thyroid and their Hashimoto's. So, and again, this is obviously published. This is research. So here's the thing. I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do. The first one is that you could listen to all of my free podcasts on the thyroid. So you go to stephencabral.com/podcasts and you scroll through the graphics at the top. All right. And when you scroll through the graphics, it's called Thyroid Healing Solutions. It's its own podcast I made for all my thyroid shows because thyroid is one of the main things we do with our practice. And there's probably like 30 shows or so. All right. So you can do all of that. The next thing that you could do is go to stephencabral.com/courses. What I did is I condensed all the information that you could read in over a dozen different books, everything that you would need to know, and I put it inside of a course. I've done that for female hormones, which helps with menopause, infertility, PMS, PCOS, et cetera, et cetera. I've done it for thyroid. That's a thyroid healing course. I've done it for digestion. And then I have 2 free ones on, or 1 free one, I should say, on detox, and then a second, which is kind of free. It comes along with the Fatlocity system for weight loss. So then you could also do that, right? That's a paid option, but it saves you, I don't know, it saves you from reading 12 plus books and a dozen years of integrative health practice, et cetera. And then the other one you could do is you could get right to it and run the Big 5 labs. And if you can't run the Big 5 labs to look at everything, which you really need to do, because Hashimoto's is not just a low thyroid issue, it's an autoimmune issue. And we know that 90% of all autoimmune issues stem from the gut, because the gut becomes permeable, it sets off the immune system, and the immune system begins to attack your weak point. For me, I've got many. One of it's rheumatoid arthritis. For you, it's Hashimoto's, right? So our genetics matter, but only matters when the rain barrel is overflowed. So that's what I would do. I would run the Big 5. If you can only do 2 labs, I would do I would run the starter kit. I would run the starter kit, and I would run the stress hormones, immune metabolism. So it's 3 labs. And that also comes, though, with an hour consultation. And that hour consultation is take you through your data, as well as a protocol to work on the underlying root cause imbalances. Remember, we don't provide treatment protocols. We don't provide disease cures. We look at the underlying root cause. All right. Good questions. And let's do one more for today. This one's from Tina. Tina says, thank you for everything you do. I recently did the Big 5 labs, and I'm working with a level 2 IHP, and I'm so excited about my journey to wellness. I have a reverse osmosis under the sink system. I read somewhere that the holding tank under my sink can cause the water to get moldy. So I went ahead and purchased a test kit that I took at home and sent it off to the lab, and the results came back telling me below. And basically it goes on to say that there's bacterial particles in the water. And it talks about how the bacteria may be harmless microorganisms that are commonly present in water sources. The bacteria is indeed an indicator of an overall bacterial presence, or the HPC. It is not an indicator of health risk, since many of these bacteria are not pathogenic or likely to affect your health. On the other hand, the E. coli or coliform are known indicators of pathogenic risk. Okay, so all of this is true, right? It's why a humidifier can be a great thing in a very dry room, but also, unless it's self-cleaning or you clean it, it can grow mold or bacteria. There's no doubt about that. So standing water like a pond grows bacteria. So if you swim in a pond or a lake during the summer with poor water flow, it has a lot of bacteria in it. So we're doing that every single day. So I used to swim at this pond when I was training for sprint triathlons called Walden Pond. And I swam at Walden Pond because it was a long pond. I could swim straight across it. And it was maybe it was a quarter mile across. Maybe it was a half mile across. I don't know. I can't remember. It was a few years back. And they would ban people from swimming in the water around mid to late August. The water was stagnant. After a good rainstorm, there'd be quite a bit of bacteria. So we know that this is present. That's why a running stream is oftentimes, again, I'm not giving this recommendation, the best place to get fresh water. Over stones and sand and all that, it becomes purified. So I use a Berkey water filter at home. I'm currently looking at a reverse osmosis system that actually sits on the counter, so I don't need to connect it under the sink. But I'll tell you this, my Berkey, I make sure that the water filters within, again, it's filtering within probably an hour to 2 hours that it takes. And then it's only in the bottom for less than, let's say, 16 hours. We have the big Berkey, which is 2.25 gallons, and we go through it at least once a day, which means there's constant turnover of water. But that doesn't mean mold can't grow, but it can, right? So if I travel, I also, when I come back home, like if we haven't used it for a week or so, I will wash it out. So you do have to wash out your water filters. There's no doubt about it. All right. The bacteria grows over time. But like this article stated, the bacteria isn't necessarily harmful. Most bacteria we're meant to work with, right? So we live in a synergistic ecosystem with the bacteria in our body and that outside of our body, endogenous, exogenous, outside, inside. But yes, some of it can be pathogenic, especially any spores that begin to grow. So my highest recommendation is if you have a self-cleaning unit, great. If not, you wash it, especially if there's not a lot of water flow. If it's stagnant, it's not a good idea. You want that water moving like at least once a day. And that's it. So that's my best recommendation. And that is what I recommend. I think you wrote something about distilled water. Was that your question? I know that I read that. Oh, that was the second part. I'm going to get to the second part of your question tomorrow. I just glanced at that now. Is that the second part to your question? Someone asked something about distilled. Oh, it was you. Yeah. The only pure water is distilled water. Okay. I'm sorry. I did read it in this question, and I see that you are tomorrow as well. I don't know what that question is quite yet, but I don't recommend distilled water. Distilled water is essentially inert, dead water. It has a certain magnetic-like quality to it, which is why we will sometimes use it with people with high blood pressure, because our goal is to often draw out minerals rather than add back. Not for the long term, but in the short term, maybe 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks or so. Again, I'm not giving that as a recommendation for high blood pressure. You should be on a program, not just distilled water program, but that's that. So I don't recommend distilled water. I'm not an advocate of it, and I only use it in certain cases. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. I will be back answering more of our community's questions tomorrow. Looking forward to it. Take care. Have an amazing weekend.